Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sidebar. I'm joined here by Savitz and Frodan, but I'm not going to waste any time with introductions because I know there's a lot of people who have been waiting all weekend for this very moment. It's time to reveal the brand new legendary minion from Whispers of the Old Gods.
New card!
New card indeed. I know it's been spanned in chat a lot today, but now this is actually a new card, so let's go ahead and reveal the new legendary minion. And Savitz, I think I'm going to need a little bit of a Finnish accent to help me pronounce this card.
I mean, I can try. It's probably not going to go that well, but Herald Volage? Maybe?
There we go.
The Finnish accent kicks
Herald
in.
Volage, yeah.
Well, we try. I mean, there's a J and a Z somewhere in there, but this card's really cool. It's a 6-mana priest card that says Battle Cry, summon a 1/1 copy of each of your other minions. And of course, that means minions on board with a 5/5 stat line.
Whispers of the Old Gods. Oh man, what a card it is. If you play it just as a standalone, 6 mana, 5/5, maybe not that spectacular, but still not bad. But that ability on it is what really makes it cool. Summoning those 1/1 copies of the other minions, so many things you can do with it.
Yeah, it's got a lot of different uses. And to give some background for a lot of you who played World of Warcraft in the past, this was the final boss of Ankhehet, the Old Kingdom, which was a dungeon that was part of Wrath of the Lich King. And he actually made copies and mind controlled everybody in the group, in the raid group. And they had to kill off each other in order to make it to the next round of also mind control. So they're sort of weaker forms of themselves, which is sort of flavorful because he comes on the board and he makes weaker forms of the extra minions. So it's really cool. And we're going to actually play a game here.
Okay.
You guys. Savitz and Frodan, you guys are going to be playing against each other. We're going to go back and forth between you guys. And you guys have to tell me a card that Herald Volage would be good with. So a card that would be good to copy with. And the first one that I hear that I don't think is that good, I'm going to buzz you guys out and you'll be the loser. Okay?
Okay.
Sound good?
Okay.
Understand the rules.
I may have come prepared with 30 to 40 different items. So
All right.
basically, it's Savitz's memory versus my preparation.
All right, well, we're going to start with Frodan since he gave up his advantage already, since he gave up his preparation already.
Okay.
And you only have about...
okay. I can just come up with cards?
You only have 3 seconds each.
Yeah,
so Dan, go ahead.
Death Rattles is the first thing that sticks out to me. So a very powerful synergy that everyone already looks towards is a card like Sylvanas. Because if you play Sylvanas on the board, you make a 1/1 token of it. Now you get to take 2 enemy minions at random after it dies.
Yeah, I gotta keep going with the Death Rattle theme here. That seems to be the most efficient way to use this card, because getting something like Jilvin Yeti as a 1/1, what do you really do with that? But the Death Rattle minions, when those squishy minions die, really can give you cool things. So I'm gonna go with the Loot Hoarder.
I want to go with another mechanic that I think synergizes immediately is Taunt. I think a lot of people really don't see the power of it, but if you play a lot of Arena, if you play a lot of cards like the Obsidian Destroyer, you realize that this 1/1 Taunt can still even be really powerful, especially in Wild format where you can still play Sludge Belcher. So I'm going to go ahead and say that card is a really nice one to pick up.
Yeah, that certainly is a nice one. Let's keep up with the taunting, and I think that if you play an Annoyatron with that, I do believe that you get the Divine Shield. So let's say Annoyatron.
All right, you got to speed it up. Rapid fire.
Okay, all right. There's another end of turn effect like Ysera. I'm going to go with Ysera.
End of turn, Emperor Torison.
Absolutely. I think Ragnaros is a really powerful. It's a 1/1, doesn't get BGH'd.
Looking at his notes.
There's so much more. Paladin Shredder is a great card because you do get a minion.
Absolutely, and on that, Naxxramas has so many Death Rattles. We have Haunted Creeper and the Nerubian Egg.
Okay. Oh, 2!
What about Paladin Sky Golem and Sneed Soul Shredder?
Paladin Sky Golem next.
That's right. You have synergies with Charge as well. Say if you want to play anything, you can control the board with 1/1 tokens. And while you're at that, I'll just go ahead and rattle us off. Dark Cultist is another card that synergizes with the Priest immediately to get buffs. That card is really good, and you can get an extra copy of it.
All right, Savitz loses. Congratulations, Dan.
I won something on stream.
A little bit of an unfair advantage, but
This is revenge for Challenge Stone at BlizzCon.
okay.
Okay, fair enough.
I did give you guys fair warning. But yeah, it's definitely a super cool card. And if you guys want to check out all the other cards that we revealed so far in the stream, or from other streamers, you can check out oldgods.com for all of your new card addiction needs. But yeah, with that, now that we've revealed the new card, it's time to get to what a lot of people have came here for in the first place. It's time to set the stage for the grand finals. It is DrHippi versus Naiman. So we're going to take a look at the first player to make it to the finals today. It has been DrHippi. Dan, why don't you give us an idea of who DrHippi is and what he's done to get to the final so far?
Yeah, so for people who are not familiar with DrHippi, I think one of the most important things to identify with is to see who he's associated with in terms of similar player level. When you look at DrHippi, you look at the fact that he's from Ukraine, he's a quiet person, keeps to himself, plays a lot of ladder games, doesn't necessarily practice in a group of people or a team, and yet has a very scientific approach to how he goes for things. He has a very strong opinion what's right and wrong. During the entire series watching Naiman, for example, he disagreed with almost everything he was doing.
Yeah.
This is a player that reminds me a lot of players like Kolento and Naiman, also Ukrainian players, also known for doing the exact same approach to the game. But I think one thing that's also really scary is that both those guys are accomplished tournament players. Naiman last year got second in the European Championships, and of course Kolento, one of the most storied, if not the most historical player in Hearthstone in terms of his accomplishments. This guy is scary, he's very good, and the most important thing is he's having fun and he's calm. I think that's one thing that's really powerful tool when you go to the finals when the stakes have never been higher.
He's full of secrets, as he said himself, and he's had his death stare throughout the entire day where he just looks across at his opponent. So, what have you thought about DrHippi so far?
Well, especially the semi-final match. DrHippi might not talk much, but he lets the cards do the talking. 3-0 against his opponent. That was pretty convincing, and if he can keep that momentum up, he's going to be doing great in the finals.
Yeah, I think momentum is a big thing. But when talking about momentum, we have to mention his opponent for the grand finals. It is going to be Naiman. Naiman came all the way from the winner's bracket and just has been winning all the way through to the grand finals, where DrHippi had that falter early on. So Dan, what is Naiman all about?
So Naiman is a well-known hunter player. Last year he did stumble and was not able to compete in the entire Hearthstone World Championship, but this year he is back. And he's also fighting for something more than just victory and glory. He's also fighting for redemption. And I think if there's anything that people can really get behind is the fact that, hey, you screwed up, but now you're coming back, and you're stronger than ever. And a lot of things, he's also fighting for so many things, fighting for redemption, fighting for pride and glory, also fighting for love, if we want to go ahead and be a little bit cheesy with the broadcast.
Sure.
The point is that he says that his fiance was the one who convinced him to still keep going in Hearthstone when he wanted to quit. And now he's fighting for her and for the wedding. How does that not make you feel good inside if you realize that this guy is on the verge of making his dream come true?
Savitz, does love motivate you as well?
It absolutely does. And
I mean, me and him don't want to talk much about it, but I mean, eventually the secret would come out.
Yeah.
Well, Naiman has also been very impressive with his deck list that he chose to bring to the tournament. He made a lot of bold choices. For example, that mid-range Paladin, that's probably something that not many people expect that. Also the Hunter. Hunter has been out of meta. He chose to bring it, and he made it all the way to finals with these unique choices.
Yeah, in fact, both of these guys brought Hunter. Last weekend, we saw the rogue players get really far. In fact, Amnesiac had to eliminate Chess Dude, and that was one of the coolest matches of the tournament. And if that didn't happen, who knows if they would have gone to the finals. This weekend, it's sort of the same thing. The two players who brought Hunter are the ones in the finals, being able to get these really pocket niche matchups, but they're also different Hunters with a lot of different tech. So different approaches has ended up in the same result, which makes it a very cool thing because everyone expects Secret Paladin, Druid, the Zoo Warlock, and even the Patient Warrior to be the standard core four, but yet the things that are really different are the ones getting through.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at the deck lineups side by side as we get set for this grand finals. As Dan mentioned, the Hunter is sort of the commonplace here, which the only two Hunters, again, to make it through the tournament. But Savitz, how do these lineups match up against each other? Because there is a couple distinct differences, most notably Naiman with the mid-range Paladin and also with that Warrior deck. How do you think these guys' lineups match up?
Well, I do think that both of these players have a lot of good and bad matchups. For example, that Freeze Mage from DrHippi, if it goes up against Naiman's Paladin, DrHippi is going to have a huge advantage. But if Naiman matches up his mid-range Paladin against the Zoo Warlock of DrHippi's, he's going to be doing so well. So, yeah, it's really nice. And Naiman also, looking at his lineup, chose to not bring a Druid, which has been a very common pick among the players.
I do want to remind people that these two have actually matched up earlier into the tournament. They do have history, and what happened last time was a lot of the players who were watching alongside, I want to make a shout out to Laughing, who popularized the Torch Freeze Mage variant that these guys are playing without Antonitis, for example. They were saying that they really like Naiman's strategy, where he was forcing DrHippi to ban his warrior deck because he knows the implications of it against his lineup. However, that allows him to ban the freeze mage and as a result get a little edge in the lineups. However, last time it felt like even though Naiman took the series, DrHippi was playing a little bit more consistent with his plays. So if he can fix that, I'm definitely feeling like Naiman has a strong advantage, assuming the bans line up the same way.
All right, well, speaking of bans, we actually do have the bans in as the players are just about ready to start. So let's take a look at those bans. The Mage ban coming out from Naiman, so DrHippi won't be playing that. And of course, Warrior ban coming out from DrHippi, not for DrHippi. So those are pretty in line with the bans that we've seen thus far in the tournament. So now that we've seen the bans and the grand final, the stage is set. We have the decks in, we have the players. Savitz, I'm going to ask you right now, what's your prediction?
Well, I'm going to say Naiman, but in order for Naiman to win, I think he needs to match up the Paladin deck in a favorable matchup, because that might be his weak point if he doesn't get the Paladin going properly. But Naiman, I'm going to say Naiman.
Okay, all right. Dan?
Well, I've been in this position before where the person that fights for justice, for love, for redemption, all the tropes that we love to see in a happy ending is probably not going to be the one who wins. I think the large reason why is when you see Naiman play, I'm not going to talk abstractly here, the semifinals performance was definitely his shakiest yet. He even admitted that he wasn't playing very well. And the fact is, momentum is a very real thing. You start second-guessing yourself because you know that you misplayed. I'm feeling DrHippi is extremely confident. He's had time to sit back, analyze what Naiman was doing, and really get a strong read to be able to grab a breath. I'm feeling the Ukrainian here, and I'm pegging him as a big favorite if he can continue that momentum and just stay calm and play to his game.
All right, well, there you have it. We have two strong players going in. We have two different predictions here going into the grand final. So the stage is set. Who will be the Europe Winter Champion? We're going to send it over to our casters to get into the action.
Thank you, TJ, and everyone else at the sidebar. This is it, guys. The grand finals of the Europe Winter Championship. Whoever wins this not only gets their prize pool or share of a $100,000 prize pool, they immediately stamp their ticket to the Hearthstone World Championship at BlizzCon later this year. The stakes cannot be higher.
Yeah, just as intense as it gets right now. Both of these players so much on the line, playing for different reasons, different motivations. Naiman, very much a redemption story for him. He's made his mistakes in the past, but he's shown he has the quality to come back this time, do it the right way, just be here with quality play. And I think he's played great this whole tournament, with maybe the exception of that little wobble in the previous series.
I mean, both these players had a couple of missteps. We did see the play from DrHippi that he didn't quite count Sea Giant correctly, but both these players have had incredibly solid play throughout the weekend, and it's no surprise to see them here.
Right, and we've heard what everyone over on the sidebar thinks in terms of who they're rooting for, who they suspect will win. Want to know what you guys at home think? Go ahead and tweet us with hashtag HCT, hashtag DrHippi, or hashtag Naiman. Tell us who you are supporting. DrHippi also has a bit of a redemption storyline here because he does, again, he wants to beat Naiman. He even said this is who he wants to face. He wants to come back, prove he's the better player.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very possible. You know, he has been impressive. Like you said, the one little shaky turn, we didn't quite count his Sea Giant correctly, but I think the top four of this tournament in general was so stacked with from the talent that we got here, who are all great players. I think the top four that we saw were definitely the four most impressive players, and anyone watching any of us here couldn't have begrudged any of them coming away with the win.
Yeah, I mean, I've been super impressed. I loved that last match. It was perhaps my favorite match I've ever cast. That incredible Freeze Mage game. Me saying that, the incredible Freeze Mage game. Yep. Definitely, I'm looking forward to hopefully a match that can match up to that one.
Very exciting series watching on the sideline, but we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to go ahead and get into the series. Introduce our first player. It's Naiman.
Yeah, Naiman, obviously hugely impressive throughout this tournament, wants to hold this down, welcome himself back to the competitive Hearthstone scene, as well as do this for his family and to repay the support of particularly his fiancée, who was a huge support for him when he was going through a rough period.
Yeah, Naiman absolutely here with a purpose, wants to get to the World Championship later this year, wants to prove that he is the best player in the world, and that what is in the past and does not affect him now. He's going to be going up against DrHippi.
DrHippi came into this weekend a name not many knew, proved himself a mysterious challenger to his fellow competitors, but has really won the hearts of all of us here. He's proven to be, while kind of a strong, silent type, definitely has a joking side, as we saw in his interviews.
Right. He said he's full of secrets, and very much the case, but I also want to point out, Naiman kind of full of secrets in his own right when it comes to that warrior deck. Once again, banned. We have not seen this throughout the entirety of this tournament, and we're not going to get the chance to see it.
I'm convinced it's Pirate Warrior. Everyone's just afraid of it. You know, they don't want to see that Arcanite Reaper Dr. Greenskin. It's just too powerful.
Dr. Greenskin, definitely Cursed Blade probably in there. So yeah, that's not going to be seen at all. And got to ask you guys before we get into this, Sottle, who do you have taking this?
I have to go with Naiman overall. I think I've known him for a long time. We went together to the first Gfinity tournament in the UK where we both shared fourth place. So I've known him as an incredibly strong player for over a year at this point. So I'm really happy to see him here breaking out, and I'm going to throw my hat into his ring.
All right, Brian?
I mean, I think that Naiman has the edge here. We did see him win this matchup before when these two met on day 2. And he has shown excellent play. As we said, a little bit shaky perhaps in the last match, but he's the kind of player who can bounce back from that, I think, fairly readily.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and toss my vote behind DrHippi. We saw it in the America's Winter Championship. Once you play someone, once you understand what they're bringing, you're working a lot more information, and it's nothing necessarily that you have to guess. I like DrHippi closing this out. He called for Naiman. He got him. This is his chance to prove that he is the best player at this tournament. And we're going to go ahead and check in on the poll results, see what you at home are thinking. And DrHippi currently beating out Naiman on social media. Not super surprising. DrHippi with that interview.
That was fantastic.
Absolutely killed it. And for a man of few words, those few words have been so impactful.
Yeah, you make them count. You don't use many, but you make them count.
All right, definitely a lesson that we on the desk can all take. Less is more, myself included. But
shh, Rob. Shh. No, not talking.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I was going to say, there's only so long we can milk the let's be quiet bit before the broadcast just dies. So I think we should probably carry on.
I was willing to play chicken, see how long. I'm sure Twitch chat was definitely digging it. But looking at these matchups now, we went over it on the sidebar. But Druid, Hunter, Warlock versus the classes which I can no longer see. But we're about to hop right into Game 1. I want to bring quick attention. We saw the Hunter mirror earlier on, and Naiman is running the... it's not super different necessarily from DrHippi's lineup at Sottle, as we've been discussing,
right.
But it is faster. And if he gets out on an early start again, can really quickly eke out a win. But Game 1 is going to be the Hunter mirror. This is the most joyous I've ever been for a final in a championship.
Yeah, speaking of being quiet, me and Kibler will just sit this one out, go get ourselves a glass of water. You can handle this, right, Rob?
I like the smork.
Okay,
you know?
fine.
Brian's not above the smork, Sottle. That's just you.
Hey, I love this matchup. I just know that you don't get a chance to cast Hunter mirrors too often, Rob, so I thought I'd let you have your moment in the sun.
Sure. Want to go ahead and look at this opening hand. DrHippi wasting no time. Leper Gnome, the one drop you want to be seeing. Naiman currently sitting on a couple of 2-drops, 2 Haunted Creepers, Mad Scientist, Worgen Infiltrator in the hand, but he's going to go ahead and put down that Haunted Creeper. Going to do a great job contesting that Leper Gnome.
Yeah, this is one of the key early interactions in this matchup, Leper Gnome against Haunted Creeper, one of the ways that you can leverage the coin to start getting an advantage. Overall, Naiman's hand looking pretty solid here. 3 2-drop options with the coin is one of the best combinations of cards you can have in your opening hand, going second as the Hunter, but DrHippi having to hero power on turn 2, not great for him.
Yeah, the early turns of these games are extremely important. The player who gets ahead in this matchup tends to stay ahead, and once they're ahead, they can leverage their hero power rather than having to spend mana to react to the board.
Right, and one of the differences between these deck lists is that Naiman does have access to more of those 1-drops, Worgen Infiltrator, Leper Gnome, so in general, his curve is going to be more beneficial on the regular, average percentage of the time, and DrHippi does get his 3-drop, gets a Misha, which I don't think is bad here.
Well, this is actually, I think, the first non-Leok we've actually seen DrHippi get.
Right, yeah.
He's just had nothing but Leoks here.
I think that's very true, but yeah, as Kibler said, early board control is massively important in this matchup because you do get to dictate the pace, you do get to be the one pushing face and asking the questions, and from the opponent, there's only a few ways to really come back in this matchup, and that's like a really great explosive trap or potentially Knife Juggler Unleash combination.
We saw Naiman choose not to put his face into the bear and retain the board presence. Brian, why do you do that?
One of the big cards in this matchup that can allow a player to come back is Unleash the Hounds. If you end up having a very wide board presence, in particular with a bunch of 1-health minions, as Naiman had, you can end up giving your opponent the board back with that Unleash. You also just take 4 damage to the face.
Right, Explosive Trap probably also a consideration. There are a number of ways to kill 1/1s in this matchup with, as we see, Knife Juggler coming down.
Yeah, both players now sat with the Knife Juggler Unleash the Hounds combination in their hand, or Knife Juggler on the board with Unleash the Hounds in hand. So don't believe we've confirmed what trap this is from Naiman. I believe both Explosive and Snake are in his deck. So if this is a Snake trap, there is a potentially extremely powerful Unleash the Hounds play this turn.
All right, we are going to see it is in fact Explosive Trap, so that Knife Juggler's fate is all but sealed. It's just a matter of when he chooses to bow out.
And this is a bit awkward for DrHippi as well, because no matter what trap it is, if he triggers it, he's going to give Naiman an additional charge of that Eaglehorn bow, and there we see goes for the attack to face that does kill the Juggler and give Naiman an additional charge.
Right, the Arcane Golem is going to come down though from DrHippi, and that's not going into the Hunted Creeper, that's going right to the face, and we see Naiman down to 16 HP, so has to choose these next couple of turns carefully in terms of what he wants to do, but looks like that Arcane Golem is not long for this world.
Right, and I actually love this play, the Arcane Golem, because it does potentially set him on a 3-turn clock here to win. Next turn, if he just starts throwing all of his damage at the opponent's face, using a hero power on each turn, by the time he's spent all of these cards in his hand, in 2 more turns' time, he will have achieved lethal damage. So setting it up from that far out with the Arcane Golem is a pretty high recognition play from DrHippi.
And this is an awkward spot for Naiman here, because he doesn't want to give his opponent the ability to just unleash and go nuts on him by playing additional minions, but if he doesn't play these infiltrators, he's not going to get any damage value out of them as well.
Right, and we've talked about this. Naiman really made a name for himself initially on this Hunter class, so DrHippi has certainly played well with the tools available to him over the course of his tournament, but if there is a Hunter master in this lineup, it is Naiman, and making the considerations, like you were saying, Brian, to play around Unleash the Hounds or a possibly devastating Explosive Trap, what I expect to see, but he's going to go ahead and get that in there, get that damage represented.
Yeah, I think all things considered, those Worgen Infiltrators just represent too much damage. Not only 2 damage on the board each, but the additional damage you get from the knives just make it too much of an attractive prospect. And DrHippi now not only has to find a way to ration out his own damage, but also prevent the lethal from the opponent.
Yeah, right now, Naiman just has lethal next turn.
Right.
He has enough to attack with all these minions, and those Worgens are protected from being able to be attacked by the Unleash. So DrHippi can't quite just go face with everything if he wants to stay in this game.
Right, we see a lot of direct damage in DrHippi's hand. Doesn't have the mana, doesn't have the time, it looks like, to chain this together to begin putting all that damage on Naiman.
Right, so he has to find a half and half play where he pushes some damage through while also addressing some of the board state. And the best card in his hand for doing that right now is Unleash the Hound. So he can split this damage up pretty much naturally as it appears, trade the dogs into the minions that are available to him, and just leave the Worgens behind. And by throwing that kill command at the face, he still gives himself a decent clock to be able to win the game. Opponent on 8 health, quick shot, hero power on the following turn is now lethal.
This is not. I think this is lethal for Naiman here. He has the 7 from the Arcane Golem plus the bow, and then his minions and hero power is just going to be enough to close this out. Right, so DrHippi didn't quite have the tools to close things out. Naiman able to take it in the backswing.
Right, but it's important to point out there, he could have traded more minions off the board using those dogs, but he needed to put his opponent to that magical number 8, which is the amount of damage that he has in hand for the following turn. If he had not have done that, then there's a chance your opponent just gets a whole nother turn on top of that anyway, which is just more damage over time.
All right, we see Naiman smiling as he closes out game 1 there, and again, this is who DrHippi wanted to face. Same mirror match, same result. The victory goes to Naiman. That fast Hunter, just too much for DrHippi. It goes entirely too fast. And Worgen Infiltrator, as I mentioned earlier, one of those cards where low mana cost, the damage piles up, and you really can't address it with anything other than Explosive Trap.
Yeah, it's one of the key differences between their 2 Hunter lineups, the Worgen Infiltrators, and then also we're seeing Wolf Riders instead of Argent Horse Riders from Naiman in his deck. So yeah, you saw there the impact of the Worgen Infiltrator, just that guaranteed damage on board, almost stealth functioning almost as delayed charge in a sense, just damage that you can rely on.
Yeah, so these are the only 2 Hunter players in the tournament. Only one Hunter can survive. We did see Naiman come out on top there. One interesting fact is that these are actually the only 2 Freeze Mage players in the tournament as well. So sole representatives of various strategies that point a bunch of damage at your opponent's face.
Right, we've seen it over the course of not necessarily even just this tournament, but last week's America's Winter Championship, that the players who made it to the very top, to the very end, were kind of keyed in on some of these strategies that a lot of the other players didn't necessarily see. So Hunter from both players, this Torch Mage variant from both of these players, and DrHippi practices alone. He doesn't have a practice group that's necessarily feeding him information, so incredibly impressed by his ability to read the meta and decide this is what he needs to go with.
Yeah, it's been really cool, really exciting to see players who have innovated with their lineups being rewarded both last weekend and this weekend. We saw Amnesiac win last weekend with the Anything Can Happen Paladin deck, as well as one of the few players who brought Rogue. Here, both Hunter players are in the finals.
Yeah, it's kind of rare when you get to the really, really major tournaments. It's rare that you see the, quote, standard lineups win those tournaments. You can go all the way back to DreamHack Winter, where it was Purple who came with that Mally lock that no one else had the read on was good for the tournament, who came out on top. So normally that last push just to get yourself a bit beyond the meta is what it takes.
Right, game 2 is going to go ahead and start up here. DrHippi is going to stay on this Hunter, and Naiman's going to go ahead and bring out that mid-range Paladin, which has served him so well over the course of this weekend.
It has, and it's a really interesting decision to bring this deck to the tournament. When people are discussing other Paladin decks to bring to a tournament right now, normally Anything Paladin is the one that comes up. No one's even really considering mid-range Paladin or the more zoo-based aggro Paladin that we've seen from other players in this tournament. So interesting to see EU's particular stance on Paladin deck building in this tournament.
I thought it was pretty interesting that we saw in the previous matchup from the two Paladins facing off against each other with no mysterious challenges between them. Not really what people would expect coming into this weekend.
Well, what a wonderful game that was. Not a single secret played.
Well, I was going to say that pretty much takes us back to Secret Paladin pre the Grand Tournament where nary a secret was ever played in Paladin. So we do see here Shielded Minibot, Haunted Creeper, Muster for Battle, and Ironbeak Owl in the hands of Naiman. So he's got a pretty good early curve and a lot of options to work with.
Yeah, this is, though, one of the matchups where this mid-range Paladin deck can struggle because it does have more defensive tools than the Secret Paladin decks, but it still is ill-equipped to deal with the amount of damage and how fast the damage can come out of the Hunter deck.
Speaking of fast, no thought required there. Just puts down that Shielded Minibot. Obviously trades incredibly well. Not even trades, rather, but gets great value against Knife Juggler.
Yeah, Shielded Minibot dominating Knife Juggler is just one of the fabulous interactions that became possible when this card was released for Paladins. Just interactions with Flame Imp as well, just so beneficial for Paladin. Really secured up the early game, gave them what they need. And in this situation, like you said, his early game hand is looking fantastic. And this is where this deck often suffers because although, as Brian said, there's more defensive options in the deck than a Secret Paladin with the additional healing and potentially heal bot, it does have less of a consistent early game draw and can often just fall too far behind in the early game.
Right, we saw DrHippi's Knife Juggler throw the knife to the face, and that's definitely not where he wanted that knife to go. Would have liked it to have gone on the Shielded Minibot to basically make it a one-for-one trade with the Knife Juggler, and unfortunately Minibot's still alive, and unless we start seeing things like Explosive Trap or Unleash the Hounds. Oh, well, there's Huffer. Huffer making a cameo this weekend. Hasn't been seen all over the place, but might start falling behind on what can become a very crowded Paladin board.
DrHippi making up for lost time here, getting some time in with his other animal companions.
You gotta spend time with them equally. They all demand your love.
Ooh, and this is a great time for the Snake Trap. It's going to give DrHippi a strong board despite his Huffer getting killed.
Yeah, Naiman can go ahead just and clear out most of this, leave behind just 1-1 on the board, sorry, but not too much to do in terms of proactivity himself. It's looking like something as simple as Haunted Creeper hero power here, so this is one of those turns where the Paladin can really get punished by having that slow play, and now the Face Hunter can really try and take the initiative here.
Well, we say that, but Naiman does technically end the turn with the bigger board.
Right.
Not by a huge margin, but DrHippi's hand is not necessarily looking great for sustainability. Beyond that Haunted Creeper, we do see the Glaive Zuka, which on 4 mana seems like a fairly reasonable play.
He has a couple of tools to punch through taunts if Naiman does find something like a Sludge Belcher, but he doesn't have that much actual pressure right now.
Yeah, and you see in his hand right now that kind of bizarre choice of one Hunter's Mark, one Ironbeak Owl. Generally, a deck kind of favors one or the other in that situation, but DrHippi's chosen to go with one of each in this deck. And he's kind of been in a situation where he's been drawing the wrong one at the wrong time for the situation he's been facing. Has both options in his hand right now, but as you mentioned, Kibler, it's just lacking in initiative right now, apart from that Arcane Golem.
That is a double debuffed Creeper, only down to 1 power in addition to losing its minions. ability.
Say, insult to injury, told to be quiet, and then also brought to the same attack power.
The key there, though, is that Naiman is getting minions on board. Obviously, the ability of the Aldor didn't do anything there, but he needs to put DrHippi on a clock. The mid-range Paladin deck is not one that wins quickly, and he's at risk of just dying to steady shot if he doesn't continue to put pressure.
Right, it's worth noting there that obviously all throughout the game you're conscious of Unleash the Hounds and how much damage you can do, but to your point, Brian, at some point you do have to put minions on the board and you do have to start representing some form of damage if you're going to possibly come out of this the winner.
Right, it's one of the ultimate catch-22s against Face Hunter that you need to build a board to be able to fight back, but doing so just exposes you to burst damage from Unleash the Hounds, and honestly it's one of the big mistakes that people make against Face Hunter a lot of the time is just focusing on defense, focusing on being timid. You know, an aggro deck isn't just a deck that tries to kill you, it's a deck that's trying to kill you the turn before you kill them. Like, the key is that you have to be able to race them.
Right, and this looks like a race that Naiman is ill-suited to win, at least in this match right here.
Yeah, the Arcane Golem plus the Sergeant here doing 6 damage, 2 more from Steady Shot. That's putting Naiman within lethal range just next turn from Quick Shot plus Hero Power. So unless this is a heal bot, ooh, True Silver? All right, that does give Naiman a little bit more breathing room if DrHippi never draws damage again.
Right. He can basically this mitigates 2 turns of hero power right now.
Well, the
so
thing is, though,
those 2 turns will allow him to set up the lethal of his own. As I mentioned on the previous turn, he's now threatening just to come back and win the game himself. Naiman is going to take his time here and calculate the various Unleash the Hounds outs right now.
Yeah, the key here, though, is that this True Silver, it's going to give him the ability to survive 1 more turn. And because of playing things like that Aldor to generate pressure, he is putting himself in a situation where he can actually kill his opponent next turn.
Right.
Ooh, he's
But
not
that's
going
kill
to get
command.
a next turn.
No more next turn for you. Quick Shot, kill command, hero power, you dead.
Yeah, and just to cover Naiman's play that turn, he chose not to play anything because anything he added to the board here, or if he popped the Creeper, may just purely unleash the Hounds on its own lethal. He had lethal set up on his side of the board, so he chose not to commit anything else to the board, but the kill command off the top from his opponent made it all a formality.
Right, DrHippi's going to go ahead and tie up the series. Both of the Hunters have won now, so unfortunately we will not get to see any more Hunter play in the course of this finals, but we talked a little bit earlier about how DrHippi's Hunter deck might have had some bad matchups in other series, but against that mid-range Paladin, again, mid-range Paladin takes so long to win, it generally just out-pressures you on the board, so a great matchup for that Hunter and a great spot to find that win to tie up the series.
Yeah, now we will see Naiman does still have that Paladin left, so he's hoping to match that up against the Warlock. That's the kind of deck he brought that to the tournament to play.
Yeah, honestly, I think mid-range Paladin against Druid does just fine as well. They have a lot of ways to just shut down the tempo, take the board early with shielded mini-bots and haunted creepers, and then use Aldor on the mid-range minions to really seize the tempo on the board. True Silver, huge card as well. So mid-range Paladin should be in decent shape in this series to pick up a win from here.
Right, mid-range Paladin Druid matchup has kind of ever since GVG just been a real straight split down the middle.
Right.
It all just depends how the early game goes. Obviously, Alder Peacekeeper becomes a big consideration. Equality can be really huge. And these cards that we don't see a lot of in Secret Paladin, we do see in this mid-range Paladin deck, and they can be very, very powerful against Druid.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show like the overall power of the card suite that Paladin has available to them. Things as good as Aldor Peacekeeper, maybe once, you know, considered in the bracket of best 3-mana card in the game, it's just not in Secret Paladin. It's not good enough. So it's crazy the amount of options they have available to them to build all these wildly different decks that we keep seeing.
Well, it will be this Paladin versus Druid matchup that is going to be what we watch next. And I expect we'll see Naiman send all those back. He does.
Yeah, Naiman playing most of his turns very quickly, and he doesn't necessarily seem like he has to spend a lot of time thinking through his turns. He plays very confidently. He knows exactly what he wants to do. And we see some players, when you get to this point, kind of really, Nixley, for example, a great example of a player who, you know, went through, and you could tell he's very emotional as he played, and there was a lot of consideration on his mind. Naiman's like, nah, I don't have it. Just gonna not necessarily try to drag it out too long.
Well, we saw, I think, in his player profile statistics that he's played over 14,000 ranked games. So you build up kind of these patterns that you recognize and don't necessarily need to take your full time.
Right. Speaking of patterns, Druid opens with Innervate and has a couple of good options here. Not necessarily for turn 1. Obviously, all we can see is that Shade, but he could wait until turn 2 to just bring out the Drake. Subtle, what do you think here?
Yeah, it's one of those opening hands where you have to kind of look at your opening hand and divine the curve out of these weird mana acceleration cards. To me, it looks like the potential of something like Coin the Shade here on turn 2 and then use the Innovate to play a 5-drop Drake or something else if it's drawn after that. Now, having drawn those 2 7-drops, though, he might try and find a way to hold on to that Innovate even longer.
Yeah, this is a matchup where accelerating out big minions isn't as strong as it can be in others. Cards like the Aldor Peacekeeper we just saw drawn, things like the Keeper of Uldaman. Lots of ways for Naiman to punish those accelerated minions.
Right. The issue with, say, with the Coin Shade into Innovate Drake play is that the Drake then lines up immediately against True Silver Champion potentially from his opponent. So DrHippi here is going to take his time, and this really is the most complex period of Druid where you have to put this together and really figure out the best way to use your opening hand against the expected options of your opponent. And based on that information, he passes turn 2 still with Coin and Innovate in hand.
And Juggler plus this Chow that Naiman just drew, definitely putting some pressure on DrHippi. And the key isn't really necessarily the pressure to his opponent's health total, but the fact that he's generating this board presence that can threaten to immediately answer anything DrHippi plays.
Right, we saw DrHippi Saddle, as you pointed out, just chose to go that hero power pass. Could have coined out the Shade. Just going to play it organically on normal time like the rest of us on his turn 3 and save that Innervate for what looks like it's going to be that turn 7 play you were talking about.
Yep, having now held onto the Coin and the Innovate, he's going to be rewarded by being able to play a 7-drop on the following turn. And Naiman misses the Juggle on the Shade, not hugely relevant since he could only play 1 minion that turn. Anyway, no chance of sniping it down, but now DrHippi from his side has to decide whether he thinks he can afford to play a 7-mana card here or whether he has to react to the board state of his opponent a little bit right now.
Yeah, Living Roots is an interesting draw for DrHippi here. It does open up the possibility of getting rid of that Knife Juggler. He could then still, if he wanted to, use the Innervate to play a Drake, but he is just going to go ahead and double accelerate out Dr. Boom. Not terribly surprising.
Yeah, it's like that Living Roots is interesting. That gives him like, let's just play Dr. Boom.
Well, as far as big minions are concerned, Dr. Boom is the one that is the best against Aldor Peacekeeper because it does bring its Boombots with it, which can give you the additional threat in the board.
Still, never feels good to see your 7-7 reduced to a 1-7, especially when you spent a few cards to go ahead and get that on board. But we'll see what Naiman chooses to do here. He has options. Could play down the Sludge Belcher. Unlikely to see Antique Healbot at this point, but Naiman definitely has some choices that he needs to make, which will determine kind of his next few turns here.
Yeah, I think the play here is always going to be Aldor Peacekeeper and Hero Power. He's just working out his sequencing on how he wants to deal with the minions, whether he's trading into Boombots. If so, when should I do that to give myself the maximum chances? Just making sure he's planning out his full turn in advance here.
And here, Naiman attacking into Dr. Boom. The reasoning to do this is you don't want to give your opponent the ability to just have a 7-7 if he does have Keeper of the Grove. We did see that Keeper of the Grove crucial in removing the Aldor Peacekeeper effect from Dr. Boom in a previous match.
Right, DrHippi now on turn 5 could play down the Drake, has the Piloted Shredder Living Roots combo if he wants to go ahead and remove that Zombie Chow off the board or just make Roots here, but I don't think there's a really clear play for DrHippi unless I'm just missing something very obvious.
Yeah, I think DrHippi agrees here, and he's going to go ahead and find out what happens with the Boombots first. Hope that makes something more appealing to him right now, because nothing seems too ideal, but these Boombots can change a lot of things here. Second one going face, definitely not what he would have wanted, and it looks like just the Drake is going to be developed here.
All right, that Drake comes down. Let's see what it draws. Savage Roar, not super relevant at the moment. Quartermaster. That is an interesting card, as we don't tend to see a lot of it anymore in Paladin, with Seeker Paladin gaining a lot of popularity, and of course Anyfin rising up as well. So Quartermaster is a great way to punish a person who does not deal with your Silverhand recruits.
Yeah, Naiman, he chooses to use his Consecration here to clear the board off rather than play something like Sludge Belcher. This is a matchup where Consecration is rarely going to be particularly effective, but DrHippi is... actually, he's going to use a Living Roots removal effect. So, again, getting ahead on this board after that turn. Second Consecration, though.
Yeah, second Consecration is drawn, but Dr. Boom comes down turn 7 here, but DrHippi does have the Big Game Hunter as an answer. But yeah, interesting, Rob, that you brought up the Quartermaster earlier. When I first saw Naiman playing this deck in this tournament with the extra Haunted and Creepers and stuff that he's put into the early game, I thought it was a list that was around a little while ago that people were just kind of calling Tempo Paladin. It was like a much quicker mid-range Paladin list. But then I did get the information that there was a Quartermaster in this list, which was one of the cards that was cut from that. So this is just a much purer mid-range Paladin, but just with that extra acceleration early on of the Haunted Creepers to secure the early game.
And Naiman, with an excellent use for the second Consecration here, can potentially use it to clear off that BGH, put some damage on the Azure Drake and the Piloted Shredder, and then see if his Boombots can take everything else out.
Yeah, once again, the piloted Shredder Boombots here are going to decide a lot of what happens with this board. Have to see what exactly Naiman wants to do, but just like for DrHippi, I would imagine the Boombots are going to be popped first, or to Brian's point, you just start with the Consecration to ensure the damage.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting turn because consecrating first actually increases your odds of getting a full board clear overall, but you may also decide that you'd rather go with a different play, or at least give yourself the option of a different play, and that means you attack with the Boombots first and then react to whatever happens maybe with a play like Outdoor Peacekeeper Sludge Belcher.
I'm in disbelief. Not a single Azure Drake has been slain by a Boombot. It will finally happen.
It's dead. What are you
But
talking
where
about?
are the 4-damage Boombots? There.
Right there.
Okay.
Right there.
Right there.
Good. Good. Finally, the universe makes sense again. I feel like I was playing a different game on ladder.
So yeah, 2/1/1s on the board, looking nice and innocuous right now, but that Quartermaster in hand is able to turn this into a really explosive board state on the following turn if it's not answered. And with the Ancient of Law coming down, it looks like that might be exactly what's about to happen.
Could possibly innervate out that shapeshift. Seems unlikely, though.
I mean, DrHippi is waiting and thinking about it. No, it does not happen, and we're likely to see a Quartermaster come down this turn. Not quite enough mana to hero power Quartermaster and Aldor, which would give him an incredible board presence, but I think Naiman's actually wondering if he wants to make the additional recruit before attacking.
Right, I mean, it really begs the question, do you just Aldor Peacekeeper it and play the Quartermaster on these 2 recruits that you have and just trade in and keep the value on the board? But Naiman says no. Naiman's just going to push face and put the initiative onto his opponent right now.
Ooh, Mind Control Tech is
Wow.
a spicy draw right there.
Well, this is actually interesting, too, because DrHippi, if he did have Force Roar, would actually be an Innervate off of Lethal. So if he had Force Roar Innervate, he could close out the game right now.
Yep. And we see the Innovate in hand, so a Force of Nature draw on that turn instead of that Mind Control Tech would have actually been lethal. 21 damage with the Raw combo, Innovate Hero Power for the 1 extra, so it is a risk from Naiman, but it's a risk of a very, very specific 3-card combination right now.
I really like that line of play from Naiman all the same. I played a lot of this matchup back in the day, and honestly, this isn't too different from how it was back in the day. This Paladin right here is very much reminiscent of GVG, with the exception of maybe Keeper of Oldemon and 1 or 2 other cards. So at some point, the Druid just outvalues you in terms of drawing cards. He's gonna steal one of the Silverhand Recruits, had a 75% chance to do so, but I like Naiman going on the offensive is the TLDR of that story.
I'm not so convinced. I really like the Outdoor Peacekeeper play, and just on the 2 Quartermasters and picking up the value trade.
That's
or on
exactly
the 2
what I was thinking as well.
All right, I'm outvoted on this one. Ooh, an imposing board from DrHippi now, although Naiman has to be relatively sure that DrHippi does not have combo.
Well, we do know that DrHippi has two Savage Roars. He doesn't have Force of Nature, but with this many minions in play, 2 Savage Roars is good enough.
Right. Yeah, it'll get there, and that's probably the only shortcoming of Alder Peacekeeper is in this particular matchup. It still leaves a minion on the board that can be Savage Roared.
I think Double Roar may be enough here.
DrHippi seems to think so.
With the silence for sure.
Yeah, the silence definitely helps for sure. Yeah, Naiman going to go ahead and concede it out here, and I think it does really all hinge on that play that we debated here on the desk. The choice to be aggressive, get the extra 3/3 on the board. You know, he will have done his research. He'll probably know that Mind Control Tech is in this deck. I believe DrHippi's Druid was banned at one point, but I think we saw the Mind Control Tech drawn very late on in the series that he played previously. So the information was out there.
There were a couple of options he had there. He could have played around Mind Control Tech by actually attacking both in and making the additional guy. Trade there. He could have just killed the Ancient by playing the Aldor rather than making a minion, so he's just left with the 2 damage minions as well, but still leaves the Ancient of Lore off the board.
Right.
Looking at that situation, though, where Naiman was starting to really fall behind in terms of card count, is there any situation where you look at it and you go, okay, at some point you do have to win this game, and if you're continuing to be outdrawn, the Druid is marshaling more resources, do you just have to go for it at some point? Because that's what I felt like he was doing.
Sure, there is a consideration when you're being out-resourced, you have to end the game before they have the chance to use all their cards, because if they get to use all their cards and maintain that advantage, that's a problem. But the trade there with just Outdoor Peacekeeper Quartermaster would have left him with, what, 2 3/2s, a 3/3, and a 2/5 on the board against nothing.
It's actually, the difference is there's 2 damage on his minions. He no longer has an Aldor in his hand. His opponent's at 6 more life.
Yep.
And Ancient of Lore is dead.
Right.
So the tempo play, it's a more powerful tempo play to play the Aldor. Puts him in a better situation right now, which I actually think is exactly what you're saying, which is you need to kind of take this risk of maybe you get out, you're not going to win a longer game because you're ahead of the board now.
Right, so DrHippi is one game away. He wanted Naiman, he got Naiman. He's currently up 2-1, needs one more win on the Zoolock deck. Naiman still has that mid-range Paladin deck as well as his Torch Mage.
Yeah, and this is, as Naiman said, he targeted his lineup against Seeker Paladin and against Zoolock. And here we see he's going with the Torch Mage, thinks this is his best shot to win this one, though he has to win both of them anyway. So it doesn't really matter which one he starts with.
Right, and normally the thing we talk about when it's about pick order, when you just have to beat your opponent's last deck over and over, it's what information do you want to conceal, that kind of thing. All bets are off right now. This is grand finals, it doesn't matter. So it really is a situation of just go with your soul, whatever you feel like playing first, go ahead.
All right, so Torch Mage versus Zoo. Traditionally, Freeze Mage is favored against Zoo because of its ability to completely stall out the board over turns. That said, Zoo can draw a lot of cards through that life tap hero power. Sottle, walk us through this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, the changes to the Torch Mage list have a few small impacts on this matchup in a couple of different ways. The big card that you're missing is Flame Strike, which can be a huge card late on against Zoo to really just blow out their board. But the extra burn that you have is actually a big deal because Zoo ends up pretty much life-tapping themselves down to about 20 life over the course of this matchup anyway. So a lot of the time, that is a line that the classic Freeze Mage can take, which is just to say, okay, you've tapped yourself too low. I have the damage assembled in my hand. You're not going to kill me. I'm just going to burn you straight back. And that's the game plan of this deck.
All right. Very good analysis on that, Sottle. We see here the game is already in full swing. Players not wasting any time. DrHippi is working on trying to assemble that board and plays down the Voidwalker last turn to protect the Knife Juggler, get a little bit more extra value, a little more damage from those knives. Brian, looking at this Freeze Mage hand, when do you think this Doomsayer becomes a real factor?
Well, he definitely prefer to have a Frost Nova to pair with it because Zoo, with anything on the board, is capable of killing big minions. That's sort of how Zoo shines with its burst damage to kill larger threats. But we see that Ironbeak Owl in DrHippi's hand may come up big in stopping this Doomsayer as well.
Right. DrHippi, the only player who brought Zoo that wasn't that Chinese version. He's running that brand version that predicates a little bit more on board presence as opposed to raw damage. It does have the Doom Guard, so it can pack a wall up, but it has less of the Enhanso Meccano, Leroy Jenkins sort of shenanigans that we saw, not even through this tournament, but again, through the America's Winter Championship.
Yeah, but here the Doomsayer with the ping on the Juggler leaves DrHippi in a little bit of an awkward spot where he only has the 3 minions and needs 4 damage, which is not really quite as easy for the Zoo deck to muster.
Yeah, pretty much asking for exactly power overwhelming, but DrHippi does have that additional answer here, which is the Ironbeak Owl we talked about. But with 2 Doomsayers in hand, Naiman probably feels like he can just throw this one out for free, essentially, and he still has that fallback of the second Doomsayer if he draws a Frost Nova and later on in the game with those Blizzards.
The Nerubian Egg is actually a pretty interesting draw for DrHippi. He could just play this into the Doomsayer and actually end up with more power on board after it goes off. So he could even save the Owl for the second one.
Looks like he is going to go for the Ironbeak Owl, though. I kind of like the Nerubian Egg play. Just, save the Ironbeak Owl for the emergency situation where you have an enormous board with, maybe Sea Giants and stuff in play, waiting to deal the lethal damage to your opponent and just use the Owl in that clutch situation. But now second Doomsayer is going to come down and we're probably just going to see the reverse situation now. Double Egg is drawn. Wow.
Ooh.
Does have that Implosion in hand and doesn't really need any sort of great heroics. Just 2 will do to deal with that Doomsayer. But yeah, the Egg's coming down, and that is just so much more power on this board.
We do see that Naiman has double Blizzard in his hand. So the Doomsayer will go off, trigger all these death rattles. First Blizzard will freeze the Nerubians and kill the spiders. The second one has potential to just finish them off.
This is a very spider-infested board, and Naiman's probably not going to have any of it. As you pointed out, Brian does have double Blizzard there, and I would expect to see the first one come out, and we are going to see just that.
Yeah, so first Blizzard comes down, locks out this board. It does have a nice curve played as DrHippi this turn with the Bran Bronzebeard and Imgang Boss if he wants to go down that line, but he's going to stretch out his game over the long term here, and you see just Zoo choosing to tap this turn, lowering their own life total. This does eventually play into this Freeze Mage game plan of just outright burn, skipping the Alexstrasza turn.
Right, one important note to mention if you haven't been watching over the course this weekend is this Torch Mage doesn't have Flame Strike, which can be a big deal against Zoo.
Yeah, and also one of the key points for why you want to hang on to Bran in this matchup is that Bran plus Lotheb, that combination literally ends the game if you play it on the right turn. If you pop an Ice Block and then play Bran followed by Lotheb, the game is over. There are no playable cards in the Freeze Mage's hand at that point that are going to save them.
Yeah, so Naiman choosing not to use this Blizzard, waiting to develop his board a little bit more, drawing some more cards. Why do you think he's going with that particular line of play? You're definitely more of a freeze mage expert than I am. So
I thought we brought you round. I thought you were just on your road to freeze mage mastery
we see
based
Rob
on the
raising his
previous.
hand.
I do want to point
I'll call
out,
on you.
we were actually given a guide by Laughing. He was kind enough to tweet it to us after we looked just absolutely shell-shocked by this deck. So we should have all done our homework, Brian. I expect more out of you, but Sottle, the question.
I mean, he needs to find a turn here to pick up some resources. He also needs to find a free turn to develop that ice block at some point. So he knows that looking at his hand, he doesn't quite have the tools put together right now to be able to finish this off. And without the Flame Strike in his hand, that second Blizzard is pretty much his last big AoE effect in the deck. So he knows that, and his opponent knows that. So once the Blizzard has been cast, that gives so much freedom to the Zoo player to be able to commit to the board that he probably just wants to hold that back for the last-ditch emergency situation.
Makes sense to me. Unfortunately, Naiman did toss out those Doomsayers fairly early in the game, so I have to agree with your point. He's pretty much out of board clears beyond that Blizzard, and Zoo has no shortage of minions.
Nope, definitely can't dispute that. Zoo, in fact, is a deck with a lot of minions in it, Robert.
Got it right.
Yup, got him. Knife Juggler going to come down here, can definitely cause some havoc with this board, and Implosion to follow it up. Very rare that you actually get a nice meaty target on the board for Implosion to hit, but this Mad Scientist will do the job. Gets the 4 roll, not space on the board for all of these rolls, and just pulls the Ice Block out of the deck for Naiman. So he's now in the situation where one Ice Block is up, second Ice Block is in hand, so he can start to set up some situation where he has some guaranteed turns, but still a long way off from achieving anything right now.
As we say in the business, good juggler, as both knives go face.
Right, obviously, Naiman might have hoped that DrHippi would have slipped up and traded into those Novice Engineers, but those represent very weak targets, and at this point, DrHippi understands he just needs to close out the game before this goes on too much longer.
Yeah, this is the kind of turn where the potential of something like Frost Nova can just be incredibly effective because of the locked down board state, no room to play anything, can't leverage any buffs, but has to react to this board. I said he'd be holding onto it for a last-ditch emergency, and that's pretty much what you saw right there. That was a pretty desperate turn.
Well, those Novice Engineers doing some work here, getting damage in. We were talking about how this version of Freeze Mage is much more about just adding up to 30. Right. And as DrHippi gets lower and lower in life thanks to his own life tap. But Defender Vargas, sorry, the rampage of Novice Engineer is over.
Right. Speaking of Rampage, he is starting to pick up the damage together in his hand now. 12 damage total, plus some pings that he can ration out over several turns. So he's starting to approach critical mass with the damage in his hand right now, and does have multiple turns that he can guarantee with that Ice Block and Ice Barrier to set all of this up.
I was going to say, Naiman tends to be a player who seems to enjoy the aggressive lines more than necessarily someone like DrHippi. And, you know, we see it. He's not looking to trade with this one. He's not really, like, fretting over what he was going to do with those Novice Engineers. Getting in that chip damage, understanding that there's a very real chance, as you said, Sottle, he just draws into enough damage to just end it.
There it is. Bran-Lotheb combination is now in hand, but the question for DrHippi is holding on to that combo and simply playing Haunted Creeper good enough this turn?
Yeah, it's definitely a tough spot because he needs to pressure Naiman here. He can't just give him all the time. You know, and he knows that that's Ice Bear, Ice Block in play. So Lotheb right now, yes, it will apply pressure, but will it apply enough to actually break the block, break that barrier, fight through everything before Naiman can actually get the damage?
Well, we haven't seen any of those Frost Novas that were mentioned earlier, so we have seen 2 Blizzards, but Frost Novas are basically the only thing that's going to hold up the board at this point against DrHippi. And is there any merit whatsoever to using Power Overwhelming on that Imp and hitting the Acolyte to deny draws?
There is merit to it. It would be a pretty conservative play. He's probably wanting to hold on to that. Opponent's still at 22 health right now, so I think if we're going to see Lotheb come down, I was going to say, I think you're forced into doing this just to try and get some initiative on the board right now. There is just too big of a situation here. 22 damage still left to deal to the Mage.
Right, you're going to see now Acolyte of Pain left alive because at this point it can only draw 1 card, so it doesn't matter. DrHippi just wants to force a little bit of damage. Alex Strauss is a fairly good draw.
Well, it means that there's lethal now. He's waiting in the wings. Along with an 8/8 dragon in play, which is my favorite part of the card.
Yes, Brian, you like dragons. You don't like freeze mages. I think we got it. Cute Pomeranians are also good, but
They're
looking
great.
at this board, as you said, Naiman has lethal represented next turn, and that life tap, you got to draw some cards, maybe see what you can do, but
Yeah, DrHippi going to go out in style here with the Dark Peddler, try and pick up maybe 2 Voodoo Doctors is the best outcome from this, but even that, probably not going to be enough to get the job done here. Elven Archer and Secret Keeper, definitely not the combination that he needs, so we are going to see him go down here, and this game is going all the way to the wire.
right. We'll see what happens in these next few turns. Elven Archer are going to come out, and because of Bran, will deal 2 damage, so 2 shots.
She said 1 shot, though. She said 1 shot.
Nice.
Brian, we've all been lied to, but it's 2 shots, 1 kill this time, and it is going to clear up the board, but Naiman draws even more damage.
Yep, just in case he didn't have him covered before, that is more than enough. Any combination of cards he likes here, just the 4-mana Fireball followed by the 3-mana Fireball, gets the 12 damage, and this one, Rob, is going all the way.
Right, Game 5, wouldn't expect anything less between these incredibly skilled players. Obviously, we've seen it over the course of this weekend, quite a few Game 5s, so I'm excited. I'm glad we get to this point, and I think going into this weekend, Naiman was one of the favorites. DrHippi, again, unknown underdog, but he has made it here. He deserves to be here, wants to close it out against Naiman.
I think over the weekend, he's become one of the favorites. He was a player that no one really knew much about, but after both watching him play and hearing what little he had to say, he's definitely made a big impression.
Yeah, and again, I just want to reiterate the point of, I think that the top 4 that we ended up with of Naiman, Pokrovac, Bunny Hopper, and DrHippi, just generally like the atmosphere around here and hearing some of the established pros talk on Twitter and stuff, generally agreed they were the 4 best players in the tournament, so things worked out nicely. We got a top 4 that really any combination of would have made a great final.
Right, absolutely agree. And we saw the same thing again with the last week at the America's Winter Championship. We had a lot of the top 4 were players that everyone was calling out as the best players, the highest skill players. So it's great to see everybody make it to this point, you know, who are considered the better players.
Was that a thinly concealed shot at Mr. Chucky there?
No, stop it. Jockey's finally talking to me again.
We love you, buddy.
But again, Game 5, it's going to come down to this. Whoever wins this, again, goes to the Hearthstone World Championship at BlizzCon later this year. Everyone at home, get on social media, get out there, vote for your player. This is the time. After this game, you're not going to have the opportunity. Ukraine has 3 big Hearthstone players at this point, and Naiman looking to bring the championship to Kazakhstan.
Yeah, this is, as Naiman said, one of the matchups that he built his lineup to beat. That's one of the reasons he is playing this mid-range Paladin deck is because it matches up well against Warlock, and this is a really nice hand.
It's really not terrible. Horned Creeper and Shielded Minibot along with the Zombie Chows in this deck will be the things that he is mulliganing for against Zoo. Muster for Battle, such a huge deal, and if he is able to cement an advantageous position on this board using the Muster for Battle, the Quartermaster to quickly follow that up could just crush the game here and now.
Yeah, we mentioned that one of the weaknesses of the Warlock deck can sometimes be dealing with a wide board. It can attack and kill big minions that come out of a deck like Druid very well, but it doesn't necessarily fight nearly as well, especially in the early game against an opponent who plays a lot of different minions, and that's exactly what's going to happen here.
Well, we see here that DrHippi has 3 different options on turn 2, and Nerubian Egg, Knife Juggler, Dark Peddler. What do you like here?
Having just seen the coin used from mid-range Paladin, this is a deck that kind of famously can't really leverage minions up, doesn't play tempo minions like Abusive Sergeant, things like that. So I think the Knife Juggler is actually fairly safe on this board going into 2 mana, but you would also expect the Shielded Minibot to come down on the following turn, having seen the Creeper coined out, which then exposes your Knife Juggler a little bit more to that on the following turn. So all things considered, I kind of like the egg here and then try and find a potential play with it using the Dark Peddler on a following turn.
That's exactly what DrHippi goes with. Well, we haven't seen the Peddler used just yet, but I imagine that is what's going to come down, and it does.
Really hoping for that Abusive Sergeant. Soulfire's not bad. In fact, I would say all 3 of these options are honestly reasonably solid. Maybe Leper Gnome a little weaker because it gives less board pressure.
Yeah, I think Leper Gnome was the black sheep of that family. It was between Voidwalker and Soulfire, but he was really looking for some sort of tempo play for that egg to go into the mini-bot here. Abusive Sergeant or Power Overwhelming would have been the dream.
And the Voidwalker is pretty good because it does protect his minions on board right now, but this Muster for Battle will help those minions get the edge they need to do some damage here.
Right.
Right,
There's
we are-
also a consideration here for him to just use the Zombie Chow and the Hero Power to reduce the amount of turns that his 1/1 recruits are exposed onto the board, to basically to shrink the gap between the Muster for Battle and the Quartermaster, so there's less chance for it to be dealt with. But he does go ahead and use the Muster for Battle here, primarily just to get the extra leverage of that Light's Justice early on.
And here, Naiman is debating whether he wants to break his Spider here. He wants to figure out, do I want the extra minion on board next turn, which can potentially give him just a little edge that he can push for that fight for the board, which is really what this matchup is all about.
Right, and he'll be considering various implications such as Sea Giant from his opponent, what that means based on how many minions there are left on the board, but also looking down at his hand, knowing that Aldor Peacekeeper is there that can deal with the Sea Giant if it comes out.
Right, chooses to pressure health just the tiniest bit. 1 damage, not necessarily that huge, but every little bit helps when you're, trying to get to the Hearthstone World Championship.
Right, and so the Zoo player, again, the situation that we've talked about a couple of times so far this tournament already, just this wide board that they just don't interact with particularly well. Not enough minions in play to activate anything like Gormok. Knife Juggler can start doing some work, but only 1 knife to throw this turn isn't going to get too much done either. So starting to just fall away a little bit for the Zoo player here. DrHippi going to have to find a way to drag himself back into this game.
Yeah, Imp Gang Boss off the top. He does have that if he wants to play it. Feels bad to have that on turn 4 as opposed to turn 3. We do also see Haunted Creeper and Knife Juggler, but that's a combo better started with Haunted Creeper already on the board.
Right.
We are going to see that Imp Gang Boss come down. Could have been Gormok, but have to think you really want to get the value in this matchup.
Naiman with still this very, very strong board. I would not be surprised to see him try and maximize the value he can get out of that Quartermaster by perhaps just playing the Hero Power and Zombie Chow. It's exactly what he does.
This could represent a lot of damage if these Silverhand recruits are not cleared in this next turn.
Yeah, we do have the Knife Juggler on the following turn, though, which has the potential to do a lot of work on this board. Knife Juggler plus another minion, say there's a 1-drop drawn as well, and then the ability for the Imp Gang boss to throw another knife with its summon token on top of that means that this procession of 1-health minions across the board here could just end up being swept away very, very quickly.
Have to see what DrHippi gets here. He will, as you said, be able to use that Imp Gang Boss to get at least 1 juggle. Could play down the Haunted Creeper, and looks like he is going to end up with a second Knife Juggler.
That's interesting. Juggler into an attack with that Imp Gang Boss throws a lot of knives.
It does, but it also makes your board somewhat vulnerable to Consecration, and I wonder, that's what immediately jumps out to me. I don't know if that's necessarily a consideration for DrHippi at this point, where he's staring down such a as you guys have been saying, a wide board.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely will be a consideration, but there will also be a thing in the back of his mind that says, yeah, I'm pretty far behind right now. This has been an incredibly fast start from my Paladin opponent. I have to take the risk and go for this, and I'm not at all surprised to see the double juggler come down here. That's not where he wants these knives to be going right now.
Well, he's going to have several more that can still attack into the... he may attack into one of those recruits, even though
I mean,
now it's
this
not the
is the
scariest
read,
thing.
right? Like, how scared am I of Quartermaster? Does choose to just respect the value on the board. And those were terrible
That
knives
was
for DrHippi.
the worst possible outcome.
Ooh, and that Quartermaster could represent a lot of damage now.
This is huge. Quartermaster comes down. Those recruits, they've been training. They've been training.
Yeah, they work out a lot, and look at this board. Naiman bullying the Zoo off the board, could just start pressing for damage if he wants to.
Right? I mean, like, the Knife Juggler needs to be taken care of. Again, it's just one of those must-kill minions, but I don't really see too much reason to start interacting with these minions on the board. Let's just get this party started. 9 to face takes him down to 20.
No Hellfires for DrHippi. This is not a handlock deck, so you will not be seeing that. You will not be seeing Shadow Flame. He's going to have to get this board back through trades.
Yeah, this is a terrible spot for DrHippi now. Everything is kind of going wrong here. He can Abusive take out one of these, does get a 4/4 and a 1/1, but unfortunately doesn't actually get to trigger this Gormok because his minion does die.
Right, just fell a little bit short of the Gormok there. Imp Gang Boss, of course, does spawn a 1/1, but replacing itself as it dies on the board means that only 3 minions remained in play, and Naiman's hand just has so much gas in it. This is one of the joys of playing mid-range Paladin, that once you get your strong early game out of the way, the rest of your deck is just so meaty and beefy in the mid-game. There's just endless things to draw to keep pressure onto the board.
And DrHippi's nearly out of cards. He has 1 card. He does have life tap, but he's under a lot of pressure, so that 2 life every time he presses that button is going to cost him.
You know, more importantly, that 2 mana, it really limits what he can be doing on these turns. And Naiman, considering the opportunity to trade here, doesn't necessarily just want to go totally ham on this situation.
Yeah, Dwoniak PL, I'm not so sure if I trust your medical opinion right now. DrHippi is looking in rough shape, and he's going to have to find something spectacular if he's going to get back into this game.
Yeah.
This draw is huge. Sea Giant is not bad, but the board does need addressing, and we do still see that Aldor Peacekeeper that has been around since the beginning for Naiman.
Yeah, the prognosis for DrHippi is quite grim here.
Nice.
I stumbled all over that one.
Yeah.
The last time we'll be able to make prognosis jokes, I suspect, for the afternoon, but Naiman pushing the damage and understanding that DrHippi's gonna have to have the answers, and again, without those Warlock class board clears, it's not looking good.
Yeah, DrHippi's going to take a long, hard look at this situation here. He's going to try and find a solution to the problem. Haunted Creeper and Sea Giant coming down here. This is pretty much the last gasp for DrHippi. Addresses one of the 3/3s on the board, but still 7/9. Oh wait, well, the second 3/3 goes as well. So 7 damage left on the board. Not enough for Naiman here, but still, the tempo of the Aldor Peacekeeper here, reducing that 8/8 to a 1/8 is just so huge right now.
Yeah, Naiman has gone this far without trading. I do not expect it to stop, and okay, never mind. He is going to trade that.
I think trading the Creeper into a 4/1, probably something he'll do, even as aggressive as he's going.
You know, I did wonder a little bit, as aggressive as he tends to play, but yeah, that is obviously the smarter point. Again, this is game point, so you want to make sure you are playing this intelligently.
Right. I mean, this is the safest series of trades. He still has lethal represented on the board right now, so he's just going to tidy up, play around any absolute nonsense coming out of this deck in terms of burst damage. Implosion is a card that can potentially buy another turn, but he's still so far off from climbing back into this. Right. Well,
good result from the piloted Shredder that is not going to be pushing damage without a silence.
Yeah, not quite dead yet.
yeah, he has a couple of chances. Oh, well.
No, we're on that Dr. Boom plan now.
Right, okay, so I was going to say he has a couple of chances. He can trade the Acolyte into something to potentially get a True Silver Champion, but he's just going to go ahead and limit the life tap from his opponent by attacking face with the Acolyte. Leroy Jenkins not going to do it.
Right, we see a lot of minions on DrHippi's board, but guess what? Most of them have one attack, and there's a lot of power. Leroy Jenkins come down, and DrHippi is going to give the well played to Naiman and concede, and Naiman is going to be the Europe Winter Champion. He is going to the Hearthstone World Championship later this year at BlizzCon.
What an incredible redemption story. Naiman all the way back. Proves himself an incredible player, coming back, doing this the hard way, the honest way, the correct way this time, and a deserving champion, I have to say.
Yeah, that was just an awesome series, awesome bunch of series so far, and yeah, congratulations.
All right, Dan is standing by with Naiman, and we're going to toss it over to him and the Europe Winter Champion.
All right, congratulations to Naiman. You've traveled all the way from halfway across the world, and now you are the first Europe champion for the winter season 2016. Tell me how you're feeling right now.
It just feels good. The only thing I can say right now is don't have any words to describe the feelings. Just really happy to be here and to finally get the win, I guess.
You mentioned that this is not just also for the glory and the money, but it's also a shot at redemption. Do you feel like you've achieved that redemption?
Yep, now hopefully everyone is going to understand that hopefully I have skills and I know how to play this game.
Oh, you definitely do. I guarantee you that, Naiman. I do want to ask you one final question. You have the entire world's attention. You said you were also playing for your fiance. Go ahead. The floor is yours. Say something lasting to the fans and family that are watching you right now.
Большое спасибо моему брату, моим друзьям, которые смотрели это, ну и особенно моей невесте. Она также смотрела со своей семьей. Буду в Казахстане. Свадьба. Радость. Супер.
I understood the last word of that. Congratulations, you're champion for the Europe Winter Championship. It is Naiman from Kazakhstan. Thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in. It's been a wonderful journey. Remember to tune in this Friday, 1 p.m. KST for the Asia Pacific Winter Championship. My name is Frodan from everyone here in Hollywood, California. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.